Welcome to this RMS Support Center training. Thank you all for attending. Today will be a Train the Trainer session for RMS administrators. If you have any questions throughout today's session, please go ahead and type that question into the Q&A section of this WebEx. We do have some RMS Support Center folks on standby ready to take care of those for you as they come in. We will also open up the floor for discussion at the end of this presentation. So if you'd just like to wait until the end to unmute and then ask your question, you will have the opportunity to do that as well. The slides for this presentation can be found on our website as well as in the invitation. Our website is the RMS at rms.usace.army.mil. That link can also be found on the references slide of this presentation, along with some more resources linked there as well. These slides will be updated to include any Q&A that occurs during today's presentation, and this presentation is also being recorded, so that video will be posted on our YouTube channel. That should be posted within about 5 business days following our presentation today, so keep an eye out for that. That video will be made available on both the YouTube and listed on the RMS website as well. So here we have some preliminary guidance for how to take in this type of training. The Train the Trainer course is designed and intended for district administrators. There are no prerequisites for this course. However, attendees are expected to be very familiar with navigating RMS, entering data in RMS, and knowledge of governing regulations. Attendees should also expect to gain a deeper understanding of how RMS works, why RMS works the way it does, and gain insight on how to teach fellow RMS users. So this training material can also be used as a resource for internal district training. Here's our agenda for the day. First, we'll do a recap of the recent updates and the previous Train the Trainer sessions covered last year. And then we'll move into the primary topics for this session today, which is going to be a review of the major updates that were released in recent patch releases. Then a review of some information regarding correspondence. And finally, information regarding the Import Network Analysis Schedule module. And then, as I just mentioned, at the end, we'll open up the floor to get any unanswered questions taken care of and take care of any other questions that come about during that time. So let's get started. First up is our recap. Here is the list of items that were covered in last year's first Train the Trainer session. We looked at the district and office level contract preparation, and then we looked at contract preparation at the contract level. If you'd like to revisit this session, the video from that training session is linked here on the slide, as well as on the references slide of this presentation. And here is a list of the items that were covered in last year's second Train the Trainer session. So that is our most recent Train the Trainer session. We looked at the district library and the staff record at the district level. And then at the contract level, we reviewed the transmittal log, document packages, finances, the import network analysis schedule capability. And finally, we reviewed some updates that were recent at the time of this session in the QA/QC tab. Again, that video from that training session is linked here, as well as on the references slide of this presentation. So that concludes our recap, pretty brief, of the previous sessions. Please go ahead and check out those videos linked. They're linked in this presentation, and they're also linked on the videos pages of the RMS website, rms.usace.army.mil. And now we'll get started with our topics for today's session. Here are the topics we will be reviewing today. First, we're going to do some very brief re-reviews of the major updates that were released in the releases that have come out since the last Train the Trainer session, or that we had not covered since they had come out. in the Train the Trainer sessions. So that'll cover patches 491 released in July of last year, 495 released in August of last year, patches 510 and 515, which were released in November and December of last year. Patch 522 released in February of this year. Patch 533 released in March of this year, and our most recent patch release, patch 538, which was released just this past Monday. After that, we'll do an overview of correspondence with a focus on sending and receiving letters. And we'll finish up with a review of how to read and understand uploaded SDEF/XML network analysis schedule imports and what to do about mismatched codes that may come about during an import. So to start the review of the recent major updates, we'll start looking at patch 491. First up for patch 491 was an update to revision history, which was released sometime before this patch. Before the revision history was added, some information was tracked and displayed within fields on the screen, but that data is now stored in the revisions on the revision history table. So to ensure that the historical data is not going to be overlooked for those legacy views, the legacy revision history button was added so that users can still view the details regarding an item's history from before the new revision history was released. This only impacts the contractor payrolls and hazard analysis modules. This button will allow you to view the legacy revision history for older items within these modules. You'll notice the click for demo links on some of these slides as well. There are some videos linked in the slides as well as on the references slide of this presentation that will take you to the demonstration videos that we created specifically for these updates. Next up, the Photo Albums tab was added here in the Contract File module to allow users to organize photos into albums. The only photos that can be added here are those that have already been added to the contract, either in a module's document package or in the contract status photos. You can also link a photo album to a specific feature of work in the contract and specify a location for the album. To access this for viewing, you will need read-only access to the contract file, but in order to add photos, you will need read and write access to the contract file module. We had another update in this patch for photos in a contract in RMS. This one impacted the contract status photos tab in the contract status module and also photos within document packages. The image editor was added in the image editor button, was added to the status photos tab in this module to allow editing of the current status photo. After clicking on this button, the image editor window will come up and you'll be presented with a number of options for editing the image selected or the current status photo in that case. The image editor can also be used in document packages. When an image is selected in a document package, the edit image window button will bring up that same image editor window for the image selected. Read and write permissions will be needed for the module where the image is being edited in order to use this feature. Next, still in contract status, the COR comments tab was renamed to be the field staff working notes tab. The field here was also updated to be titled as field notes. Any information entered here can be exported to a report that has been made available in the contract reports module. Only those with access to this module can view this, and only those with read and write access to the contract status module will be able to make any updates or changes to this field. Next up, this update was for the request for information module in government mode specifically. A reminder was added to the government response tab to make it clear that once this is completed, the contractor will be able to view this in contractor mode. As a note, secondary remark secondary reviewer remarks will not be included in that. Those are not visible to the contractor. Next, we had an update to some views within finances. The unit of measure or UOM column was added to these views to display the UOM set in CFUMs, not in RMS. Please keep in mind that the UOM in RMS doesn't have to match the UOM in CFUMs, but it is best practice to have those match. First up, we have the award cleanse view displayed here with that column added. Next, the current cleanse view is displayed here with that column added. And finally, the unit of measure column was also added to two areas within contract modifications, those being the SF30-1 tab within the contract line items or CLINs changed by this modification data grid, and also within the release mod tab on the CLIN changes / obligations for payment data grid. Whoops. All right, moving on to the import / export tab, there was an update to the import real property template file. The funding org FY column was added to this import template file so that the FY for the funding org code entered can be specified. This is a required entry along with the funding org code for each real property item entry. If you have not already, please remember to go to the import real property module under the import / export tab and re-download this newer template file since this new column has been added. The previous version of the template will no longer be recognized as valid by RMS. Next up are going to be the patch 495 updates. First, there was an update to how the obligations are highlighted in a progress payment as it relates to CFUMs accruals. Only those obligations with accruals that total to an amount that is greater than the values in the available for earnings columns will be highlighted to call attention to those. Next, there was an update to another update to progress payments. The return for corrections capability was updated in government mode to extend past sending to CFUMs and only up until partial or full approval in CFUMs. The button will not be enabled if an invoice has been partially or fully approved in CFUMs, but up until that happens, the payment can be returned back to the contractor for corrections. Next, in the change request package tab, the PNM and POM options were reinstated to this add menu. When a PNM and or POM document is created and added using this operation, it will be placed into the document package for this change request. Moving on to submittals and the transmittal log. The recall transmittal button was added for completed transmittals in government mode. The recall transmittal button can be used to get the transmittal back into government review so that any fixes and or updates can be made on the government's part. When a recall is performed, that is going to be recorded as a recall in the revision history for the transmittal. And if you select to view this recall version from the revision history table, the version of the transmittal as it was when it was in review will be presented. So the contractor signed and submitted transmittal before the QA codes and signatures were applied to the ENG 4025 will be presented. In this view, the recall comments button is available, and that's going to bring up the transmittal recall reason that was entered during the transmittal recall. Next up, also still in the transmittal log, is for the date sent to contractor field. Previously, this field could be altered or edited manually, and now that has been locked down. It cannot be entered or edited. It is generated automatically. If changes are required to transmittal after it has already been sent to the contractor, the recall transmittal button can be used for that purpose instead. To use the recall transmittal button, government users will need read and write access to the transmittal log. Next, for the closeout tab, specifically the real property module, the category codes available for selection in the real property item edit views were all updated to be the latest and most recent codes. And along with that update was the addition of the Washington Headquarters Services, or WHS, category codes. These codes were also updated in the category codes and units module within the system library as well. All right, moving on to the patch 510 and 515 updates. First up, this was an update that was released in patch 515 for all users who log in using a username and password rather than a CAC. Multi-factor authentication was enabled. Each time a non-CAC account logs in, an authentication access code is going to be sent to that account's email address. The authentication code must be entered within 30 minutes to continue with the login process. Nothing else has changed with the password methodology for username and password accounts. Entering an incorrect password 3 times will still lock the account, etc. Next was an update to how RMS IDs are entered in a staff record. If any lowercase letters are entered for the RMS ID, RMS will automatically force those into uppercase upon confirmation of that RMS ID. This was updated to conform to CFMS, which only uses uppercase letters for this. You can enter any case in that add staff member window, but it will be stored as uppercase so that any CFMS interactions with RMS will work properly for users. Moving on, there was an update to the contract description module. The contract number and delivery number fields are no longer as restrictive as they were before this patch release. Some contract numbers have evolved beyond the guidelines that were set here originally, and to adapt to that, the validation for invalid numbers here has been removed. A warning will still be provided if the contract and delivery order number fields are empty, but there will no longer be any validation errors for an existing number that's been entered. Next up, there was an update to the contract status module in the monthly progress tab. The beginning and end dates are now based on the NTP acknowledged and the construction completion milestone dates, respectively. First, the actual date will be used for this purpose, and if there are no actual dates for those milestones, then the scheduled dates will be used instead. Next, in the P2 projects module, some extra information was added at the top of the screen to show when the data from P2 was last downloaded for the contract. If the date and time shown here is before an update was made in P2, then another P2 download will need to occur. If the contract has not downloaded any data yet, then the note at the top of the screen will reflect that as well, as shown in that bottom image. Moving on to finances, the subcontractor earnings deducted by contractor parentheses total to date column can now be edited in government mode. As a reminder, this number should only be entered as a positive number, and if it's entered on one invoice, it will need to be added to all subsequent invoices until the contractor states that the sub has completed the job and the funds can now be dispersed to the sub. Next up, also in progress payments. This one was for the refund fields on the obligations tab. Negative numbers can no longer be entered into these fields. Only the amount that needs to be refunded should be entered here. So it would actually be counterintuitive to enter a negative number here. So to avoid that altogether, RMS just won't allow that type of entry. Only a number higher than 0 can be entered here, and an error message will be provided if something other than that is attempted. Moving on to contract modifications, we had a pretty significant update here for the SF30 and RMS. The SF30 report can no longer be printed from RMS. The printing of individual non-compliant SF30 reports can lead to the ACO or the contractor signing incorrect or duplicate versions of the official SF30, so that's no longer a capability in RMS. ACWS is the contracting official system for creating SF30s, and those SF30s created in ACWS are the only ones considered as valid modification award documents. So since the SF30 report can no longer be printed as a report from RMS, either from the mod or from the contract reports module, the SF30 button's functionality has been slightly updated as well. This button will now just bring up a consolidated view of all the information that's been entered into the modification, as shown here. And from here, the information in each text box can be copied and pasted into the appropriate area within ACWS if needed. Next, still in contract modifications, this is related to that update I reviewed previously in the contract description module. RMS will no longer present the errors shown here on the slide since that validation for a valid contract number was removed, and these will no longer impact the completion of a mod package. Next, this update was part of patch 510. Before an AHA is submitted to the government, it can be deleted by contractors in contractor mode. If the AHA has been submitted, however, then it cannot be deleted in contractor mode. We had another pretty significant update made to the hazard analysis module in both government and contractor mode. This one was released in patch 510, so this is a bit out of order. Our apologies, but either way, this module now contains a more detailed activity hazard analysis or AHA builder. Some fields already existed here in the legacy view, and other new fields have been added. All the AHAs that were started in RMS before this patch release will still maintain that legacy view of the AHA screen, and any AHAs started after the release of patch 510 will have this new AHA builder style view. Here we're showing the contractor mode of view of the AHA builder. The date submitted and activity fields will be required, and at least one hazard step will need to have been entered in order to complete an AHA. The new AHA builder also contains a field to reflect the overall risk assessment code for the hazard analysis, and this value is computed from the hazard step with the highest risk assessment code. The risk assessment code for each hazard analysis is computed from the combination of the severity and probability selected for the step. And guidance for the risk assessment code can be found by clicking on that code matrix button in the top right corner of the screen. That's going to bring up this guide, which is going to provide an explanation of how to select probability and severity for hazard steps. And it also provides a graphical view of the matrix that determines how the combination of selections result in a risk assessment code. In addition to the hazard steps, there are also grids available for recording the hazard equipment included and the involved personnel for the hazard analysis. Hazard equipment is not required to be added to have a completed AHA, but when adding it, an equipment title will be required and a training and inspection date can be entered if known. When adding involved personnel, selections can be made from the contractor staff lookup for the contract. If someone should be included in the involved personnel, but they are not a user in RMS, the manual upload capabilities are available to take care of that. The completion process for an AHA was also updated. Once the information has all been completed, a button is available to generate the ENG 6206 or the AA 6206, yes, or the AHA report. This is going to populate all the information entered into the AHA builder into an ENG 6206, which will then be added to a new document package. Clicking on this button will also make most of the fields in the AHA read-only in contractor mode, the only exception being the Sign ENG 6206 button in the involved personnel grid. This button will also become active once the ENG 6206 has been generated. All the individuals listed in the involved personnel grid do need to sign the ENG 6206. All users included in the involved personnel will need at least read-only permissions to access and sign the AHA that they are associated with. When the government receives an AHA from the contractor, the information fields completed by the contractor will be read-only in the government's view. However, the government entry fields will be active. So they can add government remarks and accept the AHA by checking the accepted checkbox. The date reviewed and reviewed by fields will automatically be filled in with the date it was accepted and the name of the user who performed the acceptance. This action will also sign the ENG 6206 and the document package will also become accepted. And then, of course, to return the AHA, they can enter any corrections needed in the remarks field and check the returned checkbox. Access to the hazard analysis module will be required in order to access the AHA builder, and in order to make edits, of course, the read and write access level will need to be granted to the user. Okay, next, there was also an update made to the import submittal register in Excel capability. The activity ID column was added to the import template file for this purpose, and it can be used to specify if a submittal is assigned to a pay activity in the import. Entering a valid activity ID here is going to fill in the required for activity field in the submittal item. This template will need to be re-downloaded if it has not already from the import submittals-excel module for those who had it stored before this patch release. Since the template has been updated, RMS will no longer recognize that previous version as valid. The activity IDs that can be entered here are going to be those that are listed in the pay activities module in a contract in RMS, and they will need to match those IDs exactly. Otherwise, there will be discrepancies, which RMS will pick up on. If the activity ID entered in the import file doesn't match what is in the pay activities module exactly, or if the activity does not yet exist in the contract in RMS, then those will be highlighted in the import preview for the submittal register import. You can either back out of the import here, go fix the activities, and then re-import, or the import can still go all the way through even with these invalid IDs flagged. The submittal items required for activity field will just be left blank if those are not resolved. Finally, in closeout, we had an update to how costs are distributed amongst real property items. S&A and P&D costs are based on the percentage of the total construction amount, and the DDC is now based on the percentage of construction items. So you may have noticed that these costs show up differently in the DD 1354. This update did not impact any DD 1354 documents already stored in a document package before the release of patch 510. Only after the release of patch 510 will those documents be impacted. Moving on to the patch 522 updates. First, there was an update that impacted a lot of areas generally throughout a contract in RMS. Since RMS has been made the system of record for documents, there's no longer a need to send documents to PCF. So all references to PCF were removed within RMS. So as shown here, the send documents to PCF checkbox is no longer available in the contract setup module. And here in the contract file module, we can see that the send all documents to PCF button is no longer there, and the PCF verbiage was removed from any titles or field names. The PCF status column is also no longer part of the data grid. The document statuses will also no longer include mention of PCF. Here we show the QC Daily Reports module as an example. The QC PCF status column is no longer there, and the statuses have been amended. Next, there was an update to the office description module from the local office menu. The division office option was added to the office type field selection. So now if needed, an office can specify that in that field. The user making this update will need the necessary permissions to do so. So that should be partial office admin permissions with access to the office description module. I think that's correct. This type of office will be included in district calculations for reporting. Next in contract status was an update to progress. First, RMS now does a better job of calculating actual progress by better determining when that percent updates. And also RMS will now show exactly where the information comes from and where it is being reported. So on the slide, we can see here at the bottom, RMS is showing that this month is being reported, and it is being reported on the status report as shown in that snippet of the progress table from the status report, which is also reflecting the information on monthly progress correctly. Moving on to contract modifications, an update was made so that the SF30 information preview can be exported to multiple types of files. That now includes Excel, Word, and text files in addition to the PDF file. Once the file is exported and saved, they will open in the corresponding application. Here we are showing the Excel and Word files. And here on this slide, we have examples of the PDF and text files. Moving on to our last one for patch 522, in the hazard analysis module, the AHA number column was added to both government and contractor mode. That AHA number can be edited at creation by contractors, but once it is generated, it can no longer be edited again. This now allowed the contractor users to be able to edit the activity hazard analysis title beyond creation as well. Next are the major updates from patch 533. So first was an update to the Word templates module at the district level in the district library menu. This also impacted change requests at the contract level as well. If the district default PNM or POM template needs to be updated for the entire district, then that can be performed by a district administrator within the Word template edit view for that specified template. A radio button selection is now available at the bottom of that view, and if this is selected, then 2 more radio buttons will come up so that you can choose either the PNM or the POM. When users in the district select to add a PNM or POM document in a change request package tab of a contract change request, whichever template is deemed as the district default here for either the PNM or POM will be used to generate that document in those change requests. This will only work with the newer style of change requests that have the change request package tab instead of the supporting documents tab. At least partial district admin permissions with access to the Word templates module within the district library will be required to make this update for the district. And then, of course, if you have full district admin permissions, you will be able to as well. Moving on to summary reports, the Consolidated Command Guidance or CCG metrics report was restored in the current RMS 3 application. The parameters for the report include the fiscal year start and end dates to only view the information from a certain fiscal timeline, and a fund type radio button selection is also available. Next, a field was added to the contract description module for the customer project number. Some updates were made to the CPAR evaluations module, which relate to this update as well, and I'll review more on that later in this section. Next, for contract notifications, a new notification was added to the contract notification control module to notify the government whenever an AHA has been received from the contractor. So if a government user would like to be notified of that, then the in-app and or email notification can now be enabled in this module. Next, in progress payments, but in contractor mode, a scroll bar was added to allow proper viewing of progress payment information on smaller monitors, those being 15 inches or smaller. Previously, users on monitors of that size couldn't see the information, and there was no way to scroll down or expand the area. So this update corrected that issue. A new section was added to the supporting documents tab in contractor claims/disputes, so that correspondence can be linked to the claim or dispute. To do so, you can click on the add button in the correspondence data grid, and then the correspondence entry lookup will be presented where you can make a selection. RMS will then prompt you to copy the documents from that selected correspondence after making the selection. And that can also be performed independently of the correspondence selection by using the copy documents button available in the grid, only after correspondence has already been selected, though. Moving into QA/QC, shared document packages can now be added to QA deficiencies by contractors in contractor mode. Even though these are initially added by government users, contractors can now also add or update the document packages in this area in a QC daily report. Next, for the hazard analysis module, once an AHA has been submitted to the government, contractors will not be able to add document packages to the AHA. If they need to add more documentation or edit the existing files in the document package for that AHA, then they'll need to request that the government returns the AHA so that the document package updates can be made. This update also returned the document package status column, so that will continue to be visible for document packages in government mode and contractor mode, but they will still no longer contain any of that PCF verbiage that was removed. Okay, next up, we had some updates to the CPAR evaluation edit views in that module under the closeout tab. This is in relation to that contract description module update. That customer project number is now used in this module as well. These views have been updated so that certain fields can be pulled from other areas in RMS since those values already exist elsewhere. So when a CPAR evaluation is created, those values can be pulled straight from the source instead of needing to be manually entered again. So first up here is the updated contractor information tab, formerly the contractor name/address tab. Next, this is the updated contract information tab. Also, the updated view for the miscellaneous information tab. The small business utilization tab was updated to just be the small business tab, and that view was updated as well. There was no update to the ratings tab. This view just will remain as it was before this patch release. And finally, the assessor tab was also updated to make selections instead of typing in that information. Please see the linked video for this release training on the references slide of this presentation to see a full breakdown of all of the updates for these views. Now, moving on to our last patch release updates to review. This is our most recent one for patch 538, which was just released a couple days ago. First up, the archive contracts capability was removed in preparation for some folder structure updates that are going to be made to RMS. This is going to be removed temporarily and will be restored later in another patch, though. Here on the contract selection view, when contracts are displayed, that archive button available with the add and edit buttons was removed. In the local office menu, the local office contract archive module was removed. And finally, the archived contracts module was removed from the district office menu. If you need to access an archived contract before those are restored, please contact the help desk and they will be able to assist you with that. Next up was an update for document packages. In situations when multiple users are working within the same document package, if one of those users completes the package, then the other user will receive this pop-up. Once they follow that guidance to back out of the view, click the refresh button, and then reopen the view, the document package will be updated with the latest changes or updates. Next, a fix was made in the contract status module within the monthly progress tab, so that regardless of the number of days entered into this field for adding days to the finish date, when updating schedule progress, the percentage will update to 100% as it is supposed to every time. Moving on to schedules, specifically the placement schedule module. When placement is being computed using an S-curve, updates were made so that's going to work, so that will work properly now. Please do keep in mind that an S-curve does need to have been selected before placement can be computed, though. If using this in an S-curve is not showing in that field as it's shown here on the slide, then computing placement won't work properly. Whoever is updating this will want to make sure to click on that select S-curve button to select an S-curve available in the district's district library and then compute placement for it to work successfully. Next, still in the placement schedule module, when a contractor's activity schedule is complete, meaning there are no scheduled dates or there are missing scheduled dates and actual dates do exist, then the placement schedule can be computed based on the early, mid-float, or late contractor schedule. As long as the schedule is complete, then this will work properly, and when placement is computed, the actual data from the completed schedule will be displayed on the placement schedule. Okay, so those were the major updates in the recent and also not so recent patch releases. So now we'll move on to the correspondence portion of our presentation today. As you're all aware, the correspondence module allows communication between the government and contractors, and it's where that shared correspondence can be created and tracked for each contract. We included this information so that it can be passed on to your users. We have received some tickets at the help desk from both government and contractor users reporting that contractors can't see the documents in document packages for correspondence that has been sent. So we wanted to cover that information here to provide the most updated guidance for this area. Hopefully you can use this information to train both government and contractor users on this to make sure that they can see the documents that they need access to, or at least recognize what needs to happen in order to get that stuff to show up properly. As I mentioned earlier as well, this presentation is being recorded, so this video can be shared with them once it has been put up on our YouTube channel. So here we're showing the government's view of the correspondence edit view. You should all be pretty familiar with the functionality of the different areas on this screen. So I'd like to focus on the checkboxes available at the top. The unresolved issue checkbox can be used to give the recipient an indication that the correspondence is addressing an issue that will require additional follow-up. The requires answer checkbox is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to let the recipient know that an answer to this letter will be required. And finally, the most important checkbox on the screen is going to be the accept letter checkbox. This box must be checked by the government so that the contractor will be able to see the correspondence as well as the attached documents in the document package. If this box is not checked, no matter what the sent status is set to, the contractor will not be able to access the document package for the correspondence. They will be able to see the correspondence, at least the letter part, but they won't be able to see any of the documents in the document package. So when a correspondence is ready to be sent from the government to the contractor, setting the sent status to letter sent is going to send the letter to the contractor. However, the document package has not yet been accepted, so that is why the contractor cannot see the document package yet, and that's where the accept letter checkbox will come into the process. When the letter sent status is selected, that's going to enable the accept letter checkbox to be checked. Once that box is checked, this pop-up shown here will appear, letting the user know that the letter will become read-only and that the document package or packages will become accepted. Clicking on Yes will complete that process, and a submit revision will be recorded in the revision history table to capture the state of the correspondence at submission. The permissions required to perform these actions will be read and write access to the correspondence module. So we briefly looked at sending correspondence correctly. So now let's look at receiving correspondence. When correspondence is received, those are all going to show in the received tile of the correspondence selection view. That received tile is split into 3 categories. One for all received correspondence, one for correspondence that, let me get my highlighter out real quick. So we've got for all correspondence, and then one for correspondence that requires an answer. So that will be the letters with the requires answer checkbox checked, and also with no answer having been linked to that correspondence yet. And then another one for the correspondence addressing unresolved issues or letters with the unresolved issue checkbox checked. As shown here on the slide, we have received one letter with the requires answer checkbox checked, and no letter or letters to answer that correspondence have been linked yet. So if we were to open that up, this is the view that would be shown. The areas highlighted are going to be the areas where the government can take action. The date the letter was received and the answer due date should be entered in the respective fields, and the action by field can be used to assign the letter response to a user in RMS. I'm going to focus on these buttons down here at the bottom. When a letter that requires an answer is received, these buttons are going to allow the recipient to create a letter or select an existing letter to use that as an answer to this received letter. That's also going to link the answering letter to this one and also take the letter out of that answer required sort tile back on the correspondence selection view. Using these buttons is also going to fill in the boxes shown at the bottom of the correspondence. If the received letter answers another letter that exists in the contract, then the select letters or letters answered by whatever the number for the received letter is going to be. That button can be used, and after clicking on that button and making a selection, the selected letter is going to be listed in this letters answered by this letter box. Clicking on the Create New Letter to answer this received letter button will open a new correspondence letter edit view to create an answering letter. If doing that, however, the same rules I previously just mentioned will still apply for that newly created letter. After setting the letter sent status, the accept letter checkbox will still need to be checked in order to allow the recipient of the letter to see the document package. If there is already a letter in the contract that can be used as an answer to this letter, the select existing letters to answer this letter button can be used. That's going to bring up the correspondence selection lookup so that the user can select an existing letter already in the contract to use as an answer to this letter. These actions are going to link the letters together, the received and answering letters as answered by and answering. That's how the mapping of which letters answer others is captured in the correspondence module. Both of these two buttons that I just reviewed, using both of those is going to put whichever letter, whether it be newly created or selected, into the letters answering this letter box. That's going to list the new or existing letters there. Okay, now if the government receives a letter that has some errors or is in need of some updates, then the return for correction capability is available for government users with the appropriate permissions. Again, those being read and write access to the correspondence module. To do so, the return for correction checkbox can be checked right under here. This is going to return both the letter and any associated document packages as well. Once a letter is returned back to the contractor, it's going to reappear in the draft tile of the contractor's view of the correspondence module, and the document package within the correspondence will be returned for corrections. And finally, after returning a letter, once the contractor makes those corrections needed or updates and sends it back, then when receiving that letter once more, I want to re-emphasize again that even when answering or accepting received correspondence, the accept letter checkbox must be checked by the government. Checking the accept letter checkbox is the only way to accept or complete the document package for correspondence. Also, if any documents were added to the received letters document package by the government, then the contractor will not be able to view those until the accept letter checkbox has been checked. Okay, so that was it for correspondence. Moral of the story, make sure the accept letter checkbox is checked when completing correspondence. Moving on from correspondence, we'll now take a look at the import network analysis schedule capability in RMS, specifically how to read and understand an uploaded SDEF/XML prior to import, and how mismatched codes in scheduling software will affect the schedule and finances in a contract in RMS. So we've included this information due to this tickets we've seen arise at the help desk for users seeing negative numbers on progress payments after a schedule import, or with activities showing as having $0 when trying to import an invoice using the schedule, etc. This information can be used to update your users on how to properly approve an import and hopefully avoid these issues, or at least know how to resolve them if they do occur. So, when opening an import to review and approve, before actually approving the import, the government user responsible for approving the import really should be clicking on this preview data import into contract button. This will present the activity import preview, which provides a preview of how the data from the schedule that the scheduler or contractor is requesting to import, how that compares to the data that is currently exists in RMS in the contract. The approver will really want to pay close attention to any red text that appears in the screen that usually indicates a major change, which could result in deletions, duplicates, or missing links to cleanse. These changes may be intentional, but they will want to make sure to communicate with the contractor to make absolutely sure. If that is not the case and those changes are not intentional, then there's a high likelihood that those changes could negatively impact the contract. So then the approver will need to reject the import and get the contractor or scheduler to correct those changes and inconsistencies in the scheduling software, and then re-upload the schedule file schedule file for another review. So let's break down the activity import preview, starting with the top of the view, which is a grid displaying the activity ID, description, and import status of the activities in the schedule that could be imported. So this view is going to be this top view right here that we've zoomed in on. The import status column is going to be the most important part of this section. The explanations shown in this column are going to briefly explain how the activities will be treated in RMS. So let's take a look at those different explanations. We'll start with this one at the top. Activity does not exist. Activity will be added to the contract. This is going to show if an activity ID exists in the schedule, but it does not exist in RMS in the contract yet. So then that activity is going to be added to the contract. However, the approver does need to make sure that this is intended to add that new activity and that this is not an activity that does already exist in the contract, but just has a different activity ID in this schedule by mistake. Now, for potential issues with the activities being imported, there are going to be two major indicators to look out for, which is going to be anything in red and the keyword invalid. For these activities, the filter or the funnel button in the import status column is going to be really helpful. So you can see all of those at a glance and filter down the trouble items to see only those and review what could be wrong. So if there's an activity in red, as shown here, activity not found in the schedule, activity will be deleted. The approver will really want to pay special attention to that and make sure that that activity has never been paid on. If the activity is under the same name but has a different activity ID than what's already been used, for example, it could be one of these up here, like I just reviewed. With the activity does not exist, activity will be added to the contract explanation. Then the schedule should not be approved for import. A fix will need to be made in the scheduling software to realign those activity IDs, and then the updated schedule will need to be re-uploaded and re-reviewed once again. If an activity has already been paid on and is then deleted, then that is going to result in negative numbers showing in the progress payment. It is possible to fix this issue after importing, but it really is best to avoid that if possible. Now, if the word invalid is showing in the import status column, then a closer review is going to be needed to see what the issue is. Specifically in this situation shown here, it shows that the category code for the activity or activities is invalid. How critical that may be for the category codes will depend on district policy, but if the work categories are really being tracked in the district, then the approver will want to make sure that these updates are intentional before moving on with the import. If there is a need to add a category code or codes that may be missing from the district, then they will be coming to you as administrators for the district to get those added. And that can happen in the work categories module within the district library. To add those missing or to edit the ones already there, you will need at least partial district admin permissions with access to the work categories module in the district library to do that. As shown here, there are also other changes that will be listed. So this is listing that there are changes to the description, the contract code, etc. And to view what will be changed as indicated here, you can select the activity. And when an activity is selected, the middle section of the activity import preview will show a read-only view of the information for each activity from the schedule. So real quick, I'll scoot back here. When an activity is selected up here, this is that middle section we are zoomed in on now, where it's going to show the information for that activity from the schedule. The details of what information is actually changing instead of just which fields are changing can be viewed here. So if the import status column for an activity states that the description or the CLIN or the feature of work has been changed with this import, then you can see exactly what has been changed in those fields in this middle view. The information shown here is going to change to reflect the data for each activity that is selected from that data grid. Now the bottom section of the activity import preview. So real quick, let me hop back. We're now zoomed in on this bottom section with these three boxes. This is going to just contain more information about the data within the schedule and how it's going to be added to RMS. The subcontractor codes and features of work to be added to the contract boxes will only show the new subcontractors and or features of work that will be added with the import. So that means if there is a subcontractor responsibility code or a feature ID that's linked to an activity in this schedule import, and that code or ID does not already exist in the contract in RMS at the time that the approver is viewing this, those are going to show in these boxes or in these lists here. Keep in mind that if there is nothing showing in either of these two boxes, then that means that everything in the schedule import either matches what is already in RMS and nothing new is being added again, or the schedule import has neither the responsibility codes nor the feature IDs linked. These two boxes are only going to show items if something new was added. This last box is going to be the most important of these three. It's going to be really helpful to see if the totals for the CLINs and the activities will be balanced or unbalanced after the import. The red is going to indicate improperly balanced activities with the CLINs currently in RMS. So as we can see here on CLIN 1, go ahead and highlight that. The current amount is $11,140,000, but the activity total only comes up to just under $27,000. So seeing something like this is going to be a really big red flag. Now, that could either be because they didn't link all of the activities that should have been linked to that CLIN in the schedule, or some of the math that was done is just really wrong and they need to go back to the schedule and fix that. It is absolutely recommended that this is fixed in the schedule software and not in RMS. It's quite complex to resolve in RMS, just in general, but also if it's not fixed in the scheduling software itself, then this issue will just come up again in the next import. Also, be sure to use the scroll bars available in these boxes to make sure that everything is being reviewed. So for example, in the CLIN balances box, scrolling down can reveal that there are CLINs being added to the schedule that do not already exist in RMS. And that could be intentional, but it could also be an error or a mismatch between the CLINs in the schedule and the CLINs in RMS. For example, in RMS, there is a CLIN 0001. And in the scheduling software, the contractor could have entered it as CLIN 01 or 001, and that is going to show at the bottom of this list. So the approver really needs to make sure to review all of them to make sure something like that is not occurring. This type of in-depth review should help the approver figure out what they need to tell the contractor to do in their scheduling software in order to fix or update stuff like this properly. If at any point any of this is not looking correct, then the approver should definitely stop and reach out to the contractor for confirmation and schedule cleanup if needed. And finally, after the approver has gone through and reviewed the import preview and everything looks good or everything in red or invalid has been fixed or dealt with, then the import can move forward. Remember though, sometimes those red or invalid indicators could be intentional. Sometimes an activity can be deleted or the details on an activity can be updated. That'll just require close coordination and communication between the government approver and the scheduler or the contractor requesting acceptance to import the schedule. So after the approver has determined that the schedule is acceptable, then they'll need to go back to that first view upon opening the schedule for review and accept the request to import. And however, after the request to import is approved, then the import will also actually need to be performed as well. We have seen sometimes where the request to import the schedule will be accepted by the government, but then the import is not actually ever performed. So please make sure that they know that once the schedule import request is accepted, then the import also does need to be executed still as well. Those are two different actions. Also, the initial import will need to go into the contract first and not into an invoice. An import needs to be made into the contract first. That way, the most updated information is in the contract before any amount on a subsequent invoice is requested. If it's done backwards, then that's how shortage issues can occur in a payment request. For example, if an activity that is currently in RMS is set to $0, but the schedule import is supposed to update that activity to have $100, then if the user imports into the invoice first, that activity is still going to have $0 on it because the activity has not been updated with the schedule import yet. What they'll want to see here in the import network analysis schedule module in the selection view for the schedule files is a date under the date imported column first, and then the import into invoice action can be performed, and that will then fill in the date invoice imported date in this column. If there's a date missing in either of these columns, then that import did not finalize and the most current data is not yet in RMS. Also, if there is a date in the date invoice imported column, but no date in the date imported column, then that payment is going to be incorrect and will need to be redone since, as I just mentioned, the most current schedule data was not imported first. The schedule import into contract will need to be completed first, and then the import into invoice will have to be redone as well. That will correct the improper request if that happens. And that concludes our presentation for today. Listed here are the linked videos from those previous Train the Trainer sessions, as well as the previous brown bag release trainings that we reviewed earlier in today's session. There are also some demonstration videos that could be helpful as it relates to the topics we've discussed today. Those were also linked in those release training and brown bag slides as well. At the bottom, of course, we have the common links we include in every presentation we present for the RMS website, the RMS YouTube channel, the RMS Help Desk Jira portal. We also have the phone number that you can use to call into the help desk directly, and finally, the KM portal link. I do want to note real quick also that if you are experiencing any issues with RMS, please do reach out to us directly instead of ACIT. That should help streamline getting assistance to you as quickly as possible. And so now we'll open up the floor for discussion and/or any questions you all may have. Feel free to unmute to ask verbally, or we will continue to watch as questions come in on the Q&A section as well.
I did notice that at the beginning of the training, we did have someone with their hand up. Did you still have a question?
No, I have another question, but that one I don't have any more.
All right. How can we help you?
Are the contractors going to be able to see that the pages for the schedule imports that we're seeing with all the issues?
Yes, they can see
Okay, so
that.
they should theoretically correct those before do they have to correct them before they export, or can they just export them with all those issues in it?
So what they can export with the issues in it because they can't see what's going on. What they will have to do, and what you should probably tell your government to have the contractors do, is they will upload the file, and instead of requesting acceptance, they need to go through and do the review exactly as we just talked about. So they need to look at, okay, what's being deleted, what's being added, what's being changed, are all my CLINs correct? Is everything
Mhm.
working correctly? And this is what I usually tell contractors when they come in. Technically, it is their responsibility to do that. If it doesn't work, then they have one of two options. They can still request for whatever reason. I don't know why they would, but I would highly suggest you reject it unless they give you a very good reason why they're going to pull it in that way, because there are some circumstances where they do want to actually delete an activity, and that's okay. But you need to make sure you talk to them about that one. But it really is for them to go through and look at that first before they request acceptance. Unfortunately, not a lot of them know how to do that, so we do want your governments to know how to do that in case they come in there, because I've seen a number of ones that have been imported and they're like, "Oh my God, I've lost all of this stuff." It's like, "Did you review it?" They're like, what?"
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they should
Okay.
be able to do the same thing.
Okay. So they can actually access it. They just upload the file and then review it from the
Correct.
contractor side.
Correct. Yeah, they
Okay.
can review it without requesting acceptance for import. All they have to do is just click on the button that says preview import data into contract, and then it will show them, yeah, just like what
Yes.
you can see on the screen right now. It'll show
Okay.
them that exact same view.
Okay. So that shows up on the contractor mode side too. Good deal. Yeah. I think I'll put that out there for the district to say, hey, have the contractors do this work, because it has to be corrected. From what I understood, it has to be corrected in the contract, in the schedule, rather than in RMS anyways. So it's going to go back
Correct.
to the contractor to be fixed in any case.
9 times out of 10, yes, there have been very few cases where I've seen the government actually wrote the schedule. So,
Yeah.
but usually it's the contractor that's doing it. Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, well, we still have plenty of time, so hang out for minutes. If you do think of any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. Of course, you can pop anything into the Q&A if you would like to ask questions there.
Excuse me, I did have a question about the category codes. Where can I find that in the district library? Could you point me to that, please?
So the district library, let me.
I'm in RMS right now, so I can walk with you.
Okay, so if you're in RMS right now, you're going to want to make sure you're at the contract selection so you can see the list of all of the contracts that you have.
Got it.
If you click on district library, it says, let me get the glasses on so I can actually read. It is the one that says work category code. So it is the third column, fourth row. That is where you can see the categories.
Oh, features of
Category
work?
codes. Are you in district library?
I am. I'm
Features.
fourth column over from the left, right?
That was my mistake. It's the third column over, fourth row.
Okay, I got you. Okay. I haven't spent a lot of time there. Looks like I need to, so thank you. Appreciate that.
And for anyone else who wants to know, let me see if it'll let me share today. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. All right, you should be able to see my RMS. So this is in the district library, and this is what he was referring to. This is the work category codes. So in any district, whichever district you have to go in, just click on this district library here, and there's your work category codes. And this is what's available for this particular district. Keep in mind, these are district specific. So this is why you'll sometimes see the invalid codes, because sometimes they'll work in a different district that has different category codes.
Could I just interject one more thing? But generally, our spec says, hey, your category codes have to, are mandatory and have to match the spec. So really what I'm doing is making sure that our district codes match the spec, right? Essentially.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Japan district is a little bit different than LRL, but we're good to go. I was always wondering how in the heck I could sort that out, and So, man, after
You
a
know.
while, yeah, you sorted me out. I appreciate it. So yeah,
You're very welcome. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing. Are there any other questions?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, who would be a good PLC for me? Like, 'cause there's some changes. I know there's been some recent changes. It's just kind of baffled me a little bit. Just so I'm not putting in tickets, trying to change things, to the way I want them to be. Where I have a fuller understanding of kind of what's going on in the background. Just for like discussions, who would be? I'm in the
Just
Mobile
to,
district.
just to discuss some of the changes that we've made to RMS, you mean, or some of the changes that your district has made?
Yeah, I don't know if they're district or. So, do I have a district PLC for Mobile district?
Yes, we do have that list. Let's see here. You said mobile, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Give me a second. What you can do if you ever want to see a POC list. Now, the only POCs that we have are district admins. So if you are already a district admin and you're on my list, it's not going to help you too
Probably.
much. But anytime you ever want to who a POC is, you always just give us a call and we can give that information to you. Right now, let me see. Who do I have for mobile?
Well, that would probably me or one of my employees. So it must be beyond that.
Likely. Let me check. Oh, it's over here.
So the changes have to be above the district level that I'm wanting to discuss.
Yeah, if you're wanting to discuss changes with RMS, you can always just give us a call, and most of us will know what's going on. And if not, they can send you over to me, and I can definitely help you out and give you some more information if necessary. Let's see. It looks like, yes, you are one of the POCs, is another one, and that's all I have for mobile district.
Okay. So how do I? Well, I'm trying to figure out how to contact you, I guess.
You can give us a call at 442-333-1011. And if you want, you can ask if I am not available at the time because I spend a lot of stuff going on. I will call you back as soon as I can.
Yeah, that number once again. So.
442-333-1011.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you guys so very much for joining. If you have any questions about RMS, you can always give us a call at 442-333-1011. If we don't answer the phone, please leave a message with your name and your phone number at minimum, so that way we can give you a call back. We do call you back, usually on the same day. Sometimes it might take a day. It just depends on how much is going on. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining us today. And if you need anything, again, we're always here for you if you need it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.